Excel accounting practice problem. Income statement condensed format. Get ready because we're about to excel. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. In prior presentations, we put together the worksheet from a blank sheet, now continuing to enter transactions in it. If you have access to it, there's two tabs on down below, an example tab and a practice tab. The practice tab starting out where we left off last time, the example tab in essence being an answer key. We're going to stay here on the practice tab this time. Last time we put together a balance sheet. We're focusing now on the financial statements in a bit more of a condensed format, a format that might be more appropriate for external presentation purposes. And so we're going to be grouping some of the accounts on the trial balance into, say, single accounts, eliminating the zero balances on our trial balance, possibly changing some of the names to be better categorized within our financial statements from the trial balance. Some of these adjustments, possibly the condensing of accounts, for example, could be taken care of in accounting software, possibly with the use of subcategories, allowing you to collapse and uncollapse some of this information. And some of them may not be able to be taken care of with accounting software. And therefore, even if using accounting software, you might, if you're doing a formal presentation of it, need to do a little bit more cleanup if you want to do a little bit more formal of a job. Okay, so I'm going to hide some cells. I'm going to hide the adjusting and reversing entries. I'm going to hide those because we don't need those. I just need the trial balance. Actually, I need this trial balance here, the adjusted trial balance. So I'm going to hide these reversing and the end period here. So I just want the adjusted trial balance YTD year to date. So I'm going to hide this, and then I'm going to hide everything here. I'm going to leave the skinny because I want a couple skinnies so I can hide and unhide when I get to my financials. Now remember, we made a bunch of financials on the right hand side, so we're going to go to the last financial statement where we left off with a balance sheet, and now we're going to be moving on to the income statement. So I'm going all the way to the right. We did the bank reconciliations. Here's our financial statements, and then we left off with this balance sheet at the end, this balance sheet right here. So I'm going to hide that now. I'm going to hide over to here, right click, and then hide all that stuff. And then we're just going to focus on the income statement. I'm going to make another skinny right here, skinny column that is. That's what I mean by the skinny. And we're now going to be recreating the income statement and the statement of equity. So if we go down here and just analyze what we have here, we got basically the basis of the income statement is right here in the trial balance, and we're just going to take the revenue minus the expenses. There's our bottom line net income right there. It's basically in order, but when we go to the actual form, we might want, say, more of a multiple step income statement, in which case we have a couple steps along the way. For example, we might take our revenue accounts here. Now note, when we look at our revenue accounts, we might put them in there. We might have more revenue accounts, for example, on our trial balance than maybe we want on our income statement. Maybe we want to condense some of those revenue accounts and have less line items. That's one thing to consider. We'll put them on all three revenue accounts. We've got the cost of goods sold. That's one of those big expense accounts related to inventory if you're in a business that sells inventory, which often is a major component where people want the multiple step income statement, breaking out that step total along the way of gross profit. And then we've got all the expenses. Now, if you look at some of the expenses here, you might pick up some of the smaller ones and say, hey, maybe this smaller one, I don't want a separate charge on my income statement because it's pretty small of an expense. Maybe I should group that in with some other expenses, calling them other expenses or miscellaneous expenses or something like that. Then if we go down, you got the insurance, the internet, it's a pretty decent side. Then we got the miscellaneous. Maybe we put this into miscellaneous too, or other expenses. We've got the office supplies, payroll is going to be significant, the taxes, the telephone, the utilities, and then we're going to put these two items down here into their own category. So we don't have a whole lot of condensing in this particular worksheet because we didn't get too extravagant in our subcategories. But notice if you're working in larger type of companies, it's quite possible that you start getting a lot more subcategories or a lot more types of categories within the expenses. For example, you might be breaking out your expenses like by location or something like that. And then you got different expense line items. You could have different expense accounts for basically the different depreciations, in which case you might want to group them together when you actually put them on the financial statements. You might have different expense accounts for the different types of insurance that you have. And for many of those different kind of categorizations, for example, if we had different variants of depreciation or different variants of insurance, then we might make a parent account, calling it just insurance expense, and then have our subsidiary accounts underneath it. And that in that way, in accounting software, the software can often take care of that by either presenting in an extended format where we see the sub-accounts or condensing them. And that's one of the major types of things you end up doing with the income statement. The other thing you might do with an income statement, if you got this from accounting software, it's going to be in order by just alphabetical order within the expense area, unless they use account numbers. Even if they use account numbers, you might further go back in here and say, I'd rather try to maybe organize my expense accounts by the largest to the smallest or something like that, the more relevant accounts up top, as opposed to whatever order they happen to be in, because that might make it look a little cleaner, and that might also make it more relevant in that you got the more relevant expenses up top. Okay, so we're gonna create this thing. I'm just gonna call it an income statement. Income statement. I should do the the date and whatnot, but I'm just gonna keep it generic income statement. I'm gonna highlight a couple. Let's make like 3 of these. Do our header thing with the font group. Make this black and white on the header, as has been our custom. Making this a little bit larger now, dragging it to the right, and then we'll make our subcategory for revenue. So oftentimes when you're looking at an income statement, if you look at like a QuickBooks or something like that, they often group the income accounts under the subcategory of income. I think the revenue might be a more professional type of name than income, or sales. Sales might be an account, but you'd often group it under income. Also, we'll often call it an income statement as opposed to a profit and loss if it's more of a formal presentation. You can change that. You could change, in other words, the income statement header in a lot of accounting software if it's presented as a profit and loss. You can't really change the subcategories for revenue. Oftentimes, it's going to be called income up there. Not a big deal, but you could that's something you could do differently if you so choose, if you wanted to try to make it sound a little bit more formal. Then we're going to pick up the equipment rental income. I'll just copy this down. Copying that down, I'm going to indent now, alignment and indent. And then I'm going to call this total revenue. Your total revenue. That's what I called it. That's what I'm going to call it. Alignment, increase the indenting 2 times. I'm going to put this in the inner column because it's a subcategory. There are credits down here. I don't want credits on my statement because this is a plus and minus thing. So I'm going to flip the signs by putting a negative of the equipment of the 2,260. And then I'll copy that down. Copying that down. Now notice that once again, within this subcategory, it put the one in alphabetical order up top, because that's how we're mirroring what would happen in the accounting software if account numbers were not used. So let's see if we can shift this around a bit. I'm gonna make some space. I'm gonna put my cursor here. Now you can move this by putting your cursor on it, or you could say Control X, cutting it, which is probably faster, and then Control V. And then I'm gonna take this top one right there. I'm going to bring it to the bottom because that's the smallest number. Control X and put that down here. Control V. It'll keep the formulas that way. So we're still pulling the formula over. So that's still good. And then I'm going to take this whole thing and Control X and Control V, put it right up top. So now it's in order, like kind of the most important ones up top there. Equals the sum in the outer column. So there we have it. Let's put an underline here. Font group and underline. By the way, if it's a long income statement, you might want to put the whole income statement together first and then start manipulating the ordering so that you know that you got to the proper bottom line number, and you're not then trying to figure out what you missed when you're trying to reorder things. So you might want to get to the balance first and then go back in and clean some stuff up in such a way that you're not going to be out of balance once in balance. So now we're going to go back down again. We're going to say the cost of goods sold is going to be the next item here. Cost of the goods that are sold. Important for inventory related companies. I'm going to put this in the outer column. This is going to be equal to that expense account of the 45. Whoops, I missed it. I put the skinny. That's the skinny column with nothing in it. Not the skinny We're taking the 45,954, enter. There we have that. That's going to give us the gross profit. This is gross profit. I want profit that's not gross. I don't know why the news popped up there. We'll get this minus the 45,945. We'll put up a underline here. So there we have it. And then we're going to say these are going to be the other operating. I think I haven't been putting capitals in this. Operating expenses. Maybe I should put a colon at the end of it. Now you might want to start off by just pulling over all of the expenses in the same order, and then we can get into kind of adjusting them. So maybe that'll be the easiest thing to do. Let's say this is equal to, and then we'll pick up the bank service charges, and then I'm just going to autofill down till we get to utilities, not including these last two, because that's going to go into another category. So enter, and then I'm going to say this equals in the inner column the amount of 35, enter, and then I'm just going to select those two and autofill it on down. Autofill down to utility. Look how perfect that was. I went right down to where it's supposed to go. And this is going to be the total other operating expenses. And then we'll sum this up in the outer column equals the sum of these items. We can double check that number now, 21,514, by just adding up these and says, did I get the same numbers? I should, because I pulled them directly from there. 67,468. So, but no, because I have cost of goods sold. Hold on, do it again, do it better. 21,514, 21,514. There it is. So now I can say, okay, what do I want to do with this? Maybe the bank service charges. Maybe I should include that in like miscellaneous. So how about I get rid of the bank service charges? I'm going to try to do it in a way where I stay in balance here. And I can even give myself a double check number, maybe by taking this minus the sum of these to give myself that check number, so that when I do stuff, I don't do anything that's going to mess me up. If that goes from 0, we have a problem. Houston. Okay, here we go. Deleting this, we're going to delete that. And maybe I put that into miscellaneous here, double clicking, plus, and then we're going to pick up the bank service charges in there, putting us back, so we're back matching out. So there's the depreciation, insurance, internet, miscellaneous. Maybe I put the internet into utilities, because that's kind of small right here. Maybe I'm like, maybe that should go into utilities. Let's get this out and put it into utilities down here. Make it a little smaller. We'll say internet is now in utilities. And then miscellaneous, office supplies, payroll, breaking up the payroll taxes. We could say maybe I should just have it in one account, payroll expense, including payroll taxes. Nah, I'll break it out. Okay, now let's mess with the order. So let's say what looks like the payroll is the biggest one. So let's move that up top. I'm going to say Control X, move that up here. And then I'd like maybe the payroll taxes to be right underneath it, because that just makes sense, even though it's not the next biggest one. So I'm going to move this down, cut, Control X, and paste it right here. And I'm going to move this one underneath the payroll expense, Control X, put it right there, Control V, and then depreciation, and then maybe utilities should go after that. So I'm going to select these and say Control X and put that one down, Control V, and then take my utilities here, Control X and Control V, and so that looks good. And then miscellaneous is typically on the bottom, so let's take actually the supplies. I'm going to move the supplies down, Control X, Control V. Let's take the utilities, should be underneath. The miscellaneous should be at the bottom, Control X, Control V, and then I'll take these three. I think that messed up my subtotal here, but that's okay. Hold on, because this needs to be taking that into consideration, but that's okay. Well, let me do it. There, now we're back. We got the 0. We didn't do anything funny. we're going to take this whole thing, Control X, and put it right there. And so there we've got a bit more condensed thing. Looks a little nicer, doesn't it? I feel like it's nicer. So then I'm going to take Control X and put that up here. We'll get rid of our 0 thing on the right. Looks very nice. So then let's do a selection of these items and go to the alignment and indent, and then select this item, alignment and indent. Let's put an underline under the 185 font group and underline. And so there we have our total other operating. So then we're going to give that's going to get us to our other, or let's call it net operating income. Operating income. We'll subtract out the gross profit minus the other total other operating expenses. So we're looking 1743. I can double check that number now. I could just like select all this stuff down to here and say, does that check out? Can I do a double check on that one? 1743. Check, double check. Has been passed. And then I'm going to put a underline on this one. And then I'm going to put these last two because they're not part of normal operations in another category, other income and expenses. You could break them out into other income and then other expenses, but I'm going to group them together so it's a little bit more condensed. Other income and expenses. Now, because I have both income and expenses, I want the income to be positive, the expenses to be negative. So I'm going to pick this up, and maybe down here the expense is more important. But let's first pull them in before I start messing things up. And so I need to flip the signs because I need to say negative of the gains because I want the income to be positive, and it's a credit down here. And then if I copy that down, there's our expenses, which are going to be negative in this last category. I'm going to do an indent here. We're going to indent. And then I might say, well, the negative one is more important. Maybe it's bigger. Maybe I put that one on top. So maybe I reverse this. Control X, put that underneath. Control V, take these two. Control X and put that up top. Control V. Maybe I'll do that. And this is going to be total other income and expenses. There's no maybe about it. I did do that. It's not a possibility. It's a certainty. We're going to indent twice here. We'll put an underline here. Font group underline. Summing it up in the outer section equals the SU to the M. Shift 9. Picking those two up, we're at the 419. And that'll finally get us to the bottom line called net income. Net income. We'll put an underline here. Font group and underline. Our last stop along the way was this net operating income. We'll add that to the 419, which will be a subtraction because that's a negative number. That gives us our 1324, which we could tie out down here because that's just summing up our column. And because we have such a well-crafted and beautifully constructed trial balance, then we can check it out with a double check right there, easy. And I'll just say check, boom, boom, double checked. And then we'll put a two underlines, font group, double underline, W underline. And so there we have it. Let's do our blue and border thing. We'll go around this thing and say let's blue and borderize it. We'll go up top, font group, blue, right there, and borders. Let's check the spelling while we're here. Did I do any spelling? Some horrible spelling thing? No. Shockingly, no. Apparently, at least spell check says so. I trust you, spell check. You've failed me in the past, but usually you do a pretty good job. So then I'm going to make another skinny. We're going to do the statement of equity. Statement of equity. Statement of equity. Increase the indentation here. We're going to then do a black and white cells up top, font group, and making this black and white. And then we're going to say that this is going to be a beginning balance. Beginning equity. The beginning equity is going to be from the trial balance. That's going to be our line item here. And usually there's nothing posted to it, unless usually if there's anything that is posted to it, it's going to be draws or investments, and we broke them out into separate accounts. So we're going to start off with that beginning equity number, which is going to be negative of, because I don't want it to be a negative up here. I need to flip the sign, negative of the 77895. We're then going to say that we have the change in equity, colon, which is going to be equal to the owner invested. Let's do it this way, draws, and then the owner investments. I'm going to flip the signs here with a negative. Got to flip the signs. And so there's the 500. I'm going to copy that down, copy that, Roger out, copy 10-4. And then we need this one. Maybe the owner investment should be on top because it's larger. So now I might say, okay, let me cut this, Control X, and put that down here, Control V, and then I'll take these two, Control X, and put them up top, Control V, and then maybe we then put the total down here, total change in equity, do some indentation, home tab, alignment, indent, and then indent once again, underline under the 500 font group, underline, and I'm missing net income. That's kind of important. Let's take these two, Control X, and I'll put it down here, Control V, and put net income, which is coming from the income statement. The income statement makes a statement about income with a loudspeaker. And then we'll go alignment and indent. Pick up the net income. That's important. Muy importante. And so now we're in LM7 equals the SUM, Shift 9. Adding those up, we're at the 65,824. That'll give us the ending equity, which will then sum up in the outer column. The SUM, underline here, double underline there. We can double check that last number, the 143.9 or 719, by just selecting these items in the income statement below. We just select them and we say, and that should add up to, hold on a second, all the blue. Every blue component should be the 143,719, 143,719. Double check. There's two checks have happened, otherwise known as the double check. So let's go ahead and make this borders and blue, bordered blue. Let's put this in the middle now. So we'll put the statement of equity in the middle. We could do that by going to the home tab and then doing this, but that makes that one fat cell, which I don't like that. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to the format cells, and we want to go to the alignment, horizontal, center across the selection. And so much better. Mucho mejor. And then we're going to do it here as well. Selecting those items, right click. We're going to go to the format cells and then alignment, horizontal, center across the cells, and enter. And there we have done it. Let's unhide the balance sheet and double check our totals here. The totals totally need to be double checked. Unhide. And we're way over on the end. Okay, so if we look at the balance sheet, we're in balance. The total assets equaling liabilities plus equity. This equity, though, needs to be coming from my statement of equity. So I'm going to say if I pull this from my statement of equity, does that throw me out of balance? Am I out of balance now? No. Still in balance. The income statement ending at net income, that's going to be tied into the statement of equity, which is right there. So that ties out. And we know that the ending statement of equity number was on the balance sheet. So that ties out. Now remember, accounting software also, when you get to this statement of equity, they might not have it really. They might not really like generate a statement of equity in like a QuickBooks software, because what they do is they stuff like the income statement number into this area, the equity section of the balance sheet. And that's not generally how you would report for presentation purposes. It's kind of nice for like bookkeeping purposes to kind of see how the income statement is tied out and whatnot. So that's another area where if you want to make it look a little bit cleaner, you kind of have to basically, in some softwares, depending on how they do it, kind of clean that out, and then basically do the same thing with the equity over here. And so you can see it's basically the same kind of concept. You would take the equity before the net income and then add the net income to it. You would also on a normal, like a QuickBooks type of report, have in the equity section included other equity accounts, which would be the owner investment and draws, which again, oftentimes on the balance sheet, you wouldn't really have that detailed in equity. You would just have the one account. And the same thing would kind of apply if you had dividends for a corporation. You might not put the dividends like in the equity section. You might put them in like a statement of equity with more detail. So those are some other options to kind of clean up that you might not have the capacity to do, to make those changes. If you want to within the accounting software, you'd still have to basically clean them up if you want to make it look like a little bit more formal for presentation purposes. A lot of the income statement changes we did were basically things that we can collapse accounts. But one of the things we did that was a little bit different is ordering of the account, which you can do with account numbers in accounting software. But even when using account numbers, you don't always get to the point where, the most relevant accounts are on top every month, because it might change, from month to month. So you could still do some cleanup work just in the ordering of accounts. That's more difficult to do in accounting software and so it's something that you could, if you want to make it look a little bit more formal, export the reports in even accounting software and then, reorder them in what you think is the most appropriate ordering to clean things up. There, you also just might have some preferences in terms of how you like your indenting to do, what your font, your favorite formatting is in those areas as well, which again, you can do obviously in Excel. Most database programs like QuickBooks having the ability to export reports to Excel and then do any more formatting you would like from that point in time, or taking the trial balance and then basically constructing the financial statements from it.